Hey guys, Kinsey Schofield here. Andrew Morton is one of the most celebrated royal biographers in the world, and he's been telling the stories behind palace walls for more than 3 decades. His groundbreaking book, Diana, Her True Story, didn't just make headlines, it completely changed the way the world viewed the British monarchy. Since then, he's written bestsellers on everyone from Meghan Markle to Monica Lewinsky, Madonna, and Tom Cruise, always finding that sweet spot between history and pop culture. Andrew's work has shaped how we understand the royals, and his latest book, Winston and the Windsors, dives into how Winston Churchill's influence continues to echo through the modern monarchy. This feels like a very timely book, Andrew Morton. I'm wondering, how did this come to fruition? What were you reading? What were you researching that made you think Winston's and the Windsors needs to happen right now?
Well, I'm a great lover of alliteration, so that was, and I do like an ampersand. But what I was intrigued about was the fact that there's been plenty of statesmen and politicians who've advised kings and queens down the centuries, but there's nobody that I could find who's actually influenced an entire dynasty from Queen Victoria, Edward VII, George V, George VI, Edward VIII, Queen Elizabeth, and the present king, King Charles III. And Churchill had such a dynamic effect on the reigns in different ways and on the institution of monarchy, of a constitutional monarchy. And I've since university, I've always been interested in the 1930s, so that was a good starting point. But I was able to, analyze his relationship with the Queen and with others, and it's not always been smiley, smiley. It's been choppy and slammed doors at times, and probably that's Churchill got his panache, as it were, from his father, who insulted the Prince of Wales so much that the Prince of Wales challenged him to a duel. So, so, so the Churchills are no newcomers to controversy.
No, not at all. Well, that is interesting because what question I first wrote down to ask you when I started reading this book was why Churchill, in the midst of so much chaos with the modern monarchy. But you're right, there are highs and lows, and it all kind of circles back. His influence does still exist in today's monarchy. Do you see it lasting into a King William monarchy? Do you see him learning anything maybe that his father picked up from Churchill and continuing to do that?
Yeah, I can. I mean, what Churchill's said and did has a resonance that's gone a lot further than his lifetime. I mean, it's no coincidence that when Trump was redecorating the Oval Office, one of the first things that he brought in was an Epstein bust of Churchill,
Mm.
because Churchill, was a great believer in America. He was half American himself, and um, he was somebody who uh, was pushy. He was ambitious. He was very much the American tycoon in that sense. And I think that Britain and certainly the royal family could learn from that.
Yeah, there's this wild story. I can't really remember what he was trying to do. Is he trying to get back money he lost? He's in New York and he's hit by a car. And then
Oh,
yeah, and
yeah.
he tells somebody I'm friends with the king because he knew that that would get to the king somehow. In today's age of no cell phones or cell phone social media, I'm trying to think that like that was how does he get to the king that he's there in New York and he's in an accident?
Well, it's amusing, but it's also telling. He got out of a taxi on the wrong side, looked the wrong way, and he was promptly knocked over. He's taken to the Lenox Hill Hospital, and the admitting officer nurse is very wary of this chap who's arrived without insurance, without identification, and until he bangs on the table and says, "I am a friend of the king," and he promptly gets a room,
Oh.
and it's a sign of his personal the esteem to which he's held is that the king when he hears about his accident, actually makes a transatlantic phone call to make sure that he's okay. And that, in those days, a transatlantic phone call was a big deal.
Yeah.
So, and Churchill himself, he waves away the nurses, the doctors, and he makes sure that they write out a prescription for alcohol because the days of that he must have unlimited supplies of alcohol because it was the days of prohibition.
Yeah.
And as they're trying to treat him and bandage him up, he's on the telephone himself to the Daily Mail, and he's selling his story about his accident, and he makes $2,500 out of it, and he it enables him to go on holiday to the Bahamas for a few weeks to recuperate. I
What
mean,
a legend.
that's the chutzpah of Churchill.
I mean, now I want a bust of Churchill in my office. That sounds amazing. W Churchill really believed in the institution. He understood its value. Where did that come from? I mean, he was the biggest fan of the monarchy that there ever was.
Yeah, his wife said that he was the last believer in the divine right of kings. That is to say that a king descended directly from God. Well, after all, let's just stand back a bit. He was born in a palace, Blenheim Palace, steeped in military history. Um, his family rubbed shoulders with the royal family when they were not being challenged to duels and things. Um, they you know when his mother had Jenny Jerome was said to have had an affair with Edward the Seventh. So the family was intimate, not just close.
Yeah.
And Churchill himself was a great believer in the constitutional monarchy. And he always used to say that the monarchy is pomp without power. So it was all the glittering breastplates and the horses and the carriages and so on. But the power lay elsewhere, and that's no Kaisers or Tsars wanted in the UK.
Mm. Um, why do you say that Churchill would have been Queen Elizabeth's favorite? Like you say, without a doubt, you are so committed to Churchill being Queen Elizabeth's favorite, and I love that. And now, if you're in the States, right, it's the black and white cover.
Yes,
In the States, the,
black and gold.
the black and gold. In the States, I mean, there's no question that Churchill is Queen Elizabeth's favorite. That picture is just so precious. It is just enchanting.
Yeah, I mean, I think that as Jim Callaghan, a Labour Prime Minister, said, the Queen has to her Prime Ministers offered friendliness, but not friendship. I think that with Churchill, she offered friendship, and there's a subtle difference there. He was very much part of the family, and he was seen as, as a avuncular uncle, a father figure, call it what you will. But I'm minded of the example of Princess Margaret. She wanted to marry Group Captain Peter Townsend, a divorcee. That created a constitutional crisis. And Churchill said to the Queen, "Shall I take this matter to the cabinet,
Mhm.
Ma'am?" And the Queen said, "No, let's just keep it within the family." And meaning Churchill was part of the family. And I think that was a very significant remark. And the fact that he was her first prime minister and uh, rubbed a lot of the hard edges off her, gave her the training and the advice that, after all, she was only 25 when
Mhm.
she came to the throne. And he saw it very much, his role very much as a tutor. Maybe he was maybe too long-winded at times. Maybe uh, didn't treat her with the kind of that she didn't have the knowledge that he expected. But as far as I can see, Churchill was a friend both politically but also socially. So she would invite him uh, to Balmoral, but also they shared a love of racing, horse racing, and horse breeding. And it's it's no surprise that when they had their Tuesday night audiences at Buckingham Palace, they started at 30 minutes and went on and on and on to eventually, by the end of his time with her, they would go on for like an hour and a half, and he would come out wiping the tears of laughter from his eyes.
Oh,
So they had this both intimate and friendly relationship. I think he saw her, he was half in love with her, I think, and saw her very much as a daughter figure.
that is so sweet. I love that description. What was Churchill's investment in the royal family's last name, Windsor versus Mountbatten? Why did he care? Because he was heavily involved in this decision. I understood
Well,
the Queen Mother cared, but I didn't understand why Winston cared.
Well, Winston cared because he was protecting the monarchy. Again, we're back to the monarchy. He referred back to the proclamation made in 1917 by George V that from now onwards, the royal house, was called not uh, Saxe Coburg Ungotha, which was the Germanic surname,
Yep.
but Windsor, because it was, it was kind of salt of the earth English. Yeah, it had that English ring to it. And so when Prince Philip wanted the surname to be Mountbatten because his surname was Mountbatten, and he expected his children to be named Mountbatten, Churchill intervened and said, "No, the proclamation states is quite clear. It is the House of Windsor." And Philip was furious at this. He famously said, "I'm nothing but a bloody amoeba." That is to say, I've got no influence whatsoever. Even as the only man in Britain who couldn't choose or couldn't have his children named after his surname.
I've always felt such sympathy for him there because he did play the game. He played, but Prince Philip played by the rules, but you know, I
Well, yeah, I mean, there were, as I write, three of them in the marriage, so it was a bit crowded, and the
yeah.
three were Churchill, Philip, and Elizabeth, and for example, both the new Queen and Prince Philip wanted to live at Clarence House.
Well, oh, I thought about you as I just passed Buckingham Palace. I thought this is a question I really want to ask Andrew. They wanted to live in Clarence House. That was something that was important to them. They're told, no, you have to live at Buckingham Palace. Well, why does King Charles today not live in Buckingham Palace?
Well,
Were
because
there
Buckingham
were they
Palace has
tougher on
been
her because she was 25 and a young girl, and they knew that they could boss her around?
well. I think the default position is that where the flag flies, the monarch should reside. And I think that is a good point you make about King Charles. He, like Philip, and loves Clarence House. It was the home also of Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. Remember, Buckingham Palace itself is undergoing a 370 million, I think, something like that, refurbishment, much needed. I mean, the place is falling to bits. So it'll be interesting when it's done whether King Charles then does move back into Buckingham Palace or whether it becomes a people's palace. As I don't know whether there's any talk about this, but whether the palace itself should turn into a museum, art gallery, uh, 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 general meeting place.
I would love that, obviously. I volunteer as tribute to be the over like the live-in security person. Who doesn't want energy, metabolic, immune, and skin support? Meet Peak, a luxury brand transforming wellness with the absolute best rare and precious plants, cutting-edge ingredients, and formulations rooted in traditional wisdom. Their science-backed botanicals, minerals, and supplements support sustained energy, metabolic function, immune health, and radiant skin, making it easy to live every day with vitality. One of their newest essentials, the Deep Hydration Protocol, is a two-part drinkable skincare system that keeps your body and skin hydrated while promoting better sleep. Made without sugar, fillers, or artificial flavors, and crafted with natural ingredients for a clean, spa-like taste you can feel good about. Daily use supports hydration, glowing skin, improved sleep, and sustained energy. I personally love starting my day with BT Fountain, their beauty electrolyte. The multitasker your beauty routine has been missing. BT Fountain floods your system with hydration, leaves your skin smooth and glowing, and keeps your energy high long after your coffee buzz fades. Wake up rested and stay hydrated all day. Get 20% off for life, a complimentary gift, and explore Peak's clean, pure ingredient products at peaklife.com/Kinsey. That's PIQUE life.com/Kinsey. This is hydration redefined. Try it and glow from the inside out. I didn't realize this, and I was kind of appalled with myself, but my biggest takeaway was that the Queen Mother wanted to retire and disappear in Scotland, and Churchill has to physically go over there and persuade her to return. I cannot imagine 80s, 90s royalty monarchy coverage without the Queen Mother. She was the life of the party, always had the smile on her face. We know she never met a drink she didn't like. I can't imagine that, the 80s and 90s royal family without her standing there. She was such an important figure when I
Yeah,
think
well,
about,
not just the 80s and 90s, the 60s,
well, I mean, I
70s.
wasn't born yet, Morts. Come on. But you know what I'm saying? Just to me, seeing her there, she was always just such a pleasant addition.
You're absolutely right. She was a national treasure. And I use that's an example of one of the many untold signal services that Churchill um, did for the royal family. Because if Queen Elizabeth had stayed, Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, had stayed up in Scotland, that would have been, a great loss to the monarchy. And he went up there and he spoke to her and he explained that, it's all very well being staying up in Scotland, but you have a duty to your people. And he convinced her to start royal engagements again. She was only what in her 52, 53.
Mm.
She was only young. And uh, she did so. And one of the first engagements was to America and Canada, and it was a triumph. And she realised after that she did have something she could give, and it's down to Churchill
Mm.
to convince her to go to undertake that. And the yes, King Charles has got his issues with Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, but when the Queen came to the throne, aged just 25, she had her sister, madly in love with a recent divorcee, Group Captain Peter Townsend. She had a husband with a Prince Philip, who was like a bear with a sore head because he's
He
had to give
wanted
up
to
his.
work. He wanted a purpose.
He wanted to well, he wanted to continue his navy career, but obviously the premature death of George VI stopped that. And then you have the Queen Mother, retreating to the northern fastness. So at the start of every reign, there's always been conflict and issues and problems.
Well, that's such
I
a good
mean,
point.
going back to when George V came to the throne, there was a canard, a pamphlet issued saying that he was a bigamist,
Oh,
that he um, had sired three children by the daughter of an admiral when he was when he was a naval officer in Malta. So that started again at the start of this reign. That started a legal case that Churchill got himself involved in, and
Wow.
and uh, uh, made sure that the royal family came out on the right side.
Absolutely. You mentioned Margaret and Townsend, Wallace and Edward. Was Churchill a sucker for love? Because he did always seem to sympathize when it came to matters of the heart.
Yes, he did. His first reaction to the being told that Margaret was having an affair with Group Captain Peter Townsend was a beautiful princess and a war hero home to safety, and his his wife said, if you're going to continue in that vein, Winston, I'm going to buy myself a flat in Brighton and retire to the seaside. Um, yeah, Clementine would have nothing, would have no truck with that. But you're absolutely right. Churchill was a great sucker for a romantic, and not, which is interesting, a great, and it's a theme really. He's not a great moralizer. So when Edward VIII was having an affair with another man's wife, he would go out for dinner with them. He would go dancing with them, and he didn't cut them off.
Yeah.
Um, the Queen, the then Queen Mother, or sorry, later the Queen Mother, she was far more censorious, as too was Queen Mary. So you have this dynamic in the royal family of the stern moralists
Yeah, hypersensitive.
and someone like and Churchill, who was far more relaxed about these things. And his behaviour with regards to Edward VIII and Wallis Simpson was very much indulgent. He felt that Wallis was a good thing for Edward VIII because she stopped him drinking so much, and he could only start drinking at 7 at night. I mean, which was, I have to say, that's a bit rich coming from Churchill, who started the day off with a bottle of champagne and finished off with brandy. Um, but he, yes, he was a great, something of a romantic, and you know he never held a grudge, and he was rather indulgent.
Yeah. Well, if we stay on the Wallace and Edward train, tell me about the line. This is said to Winston Churchill. In 3 minutes or 5 minutes, you've done more damage to yourself and the monarchy than anybody could have. That that's chilling.
Yeah, I mean, he was, let's just set the scene. In the 1930s, he was the voice in the wilderness. He wanted Britain to rearm because Germany was rearming. He was warning against rearmament. The British policy was appeasement, which is to say to placate a triumphalist Nazi Germany. And he found himself swimming against the tide of public opinion during the 1930s. He was seen as a relic from the First World War, and he should be put out to pasture. Uh, but he was right, as we all know now, with the benefit of hindsight. At the same time, during the abdication crisis, he associated and supported Edward VIII. He felt that, like all these other leaders, like Baldwin, like Chamberlain, like Stalin, like Roosevelt, like Mussolini, like Hitler himself, they all had one thing in common. They could not imagine for a moment that a king would give up his throne for the sake of marrying a twice divorced American who he just enjoyed a platonic relationship with. It was unfathomable. And Churchill's policy was kick the problem down the road, kick the problem down the road, play for time, go through your coronation, and then at some point in the distant future, marry. And everybody will accept it because you've been a part of the social scene for so long. And that's exactly what Prince Charles, now King Charles III, did. He followed the Winston Churchill playbook. He, if you remember, um, probably before you were born, when John Major stood up in the House of Commons and said that the couple were getting separated. He also said that they could they could still be king and queen, which left everybody aghast at this idea of.
I forgot that. What a why. I mean, oh my gosh, I can't believe. Why would you even include that?
Well, it was. I mean, he had been advised by constitutional scholars, but I think the advice was wrong. Um, but essentially, Charles played the long game. He, he first introduced Camilla to the world at a birthday party at the Ritz, and he was photographed with her, and then there was.
Highly choreographed, where all of the photographers knew exactly when to stand outside so they can capture that first image of the pair.
Yeah.
I mean, that strategy must have been exhausting for the now king and his team, because he was, come hell or high water, it was going to be Camilla.
Yeah, but he did follow the Churchill playbook. He just kept on gradually introducing her to the public and to his sons, William and Harry, and uh, uh, from having bread rolls thrown at her in car parks in the West Country, Camilla became part of the royal furniture. And as we know, they married, and this is after the death of the Queen Mother, who I think would not have approved. And I think that they kept that as her death as a waypoint to step up the relationship. So they married, and
Wow.
she was the Duchess of Cornwall. And at that time, if you remember, it was said that there were no plans for her to become queen. Then,
I
of
do
course, she becomes
remember.
queen consort. Then she becomes queen. So the establishment very carefully and very quietly changed the goalposts
Mhm.
uh, every few years, so that it was there were no riots in the street when King Charles had Queen Camilla by his side, and it was exactly the same strategy that Winston Churchill wanted to uh, undertake for Edward VIII, and when he talked about delaying and giving the king more time to think about it, and he spoke in the House of Commons about that, he was howled down by members of Parliament who felt that, having spoken to their constituents, the river of public opinion was running very much against Churchill, and his few supporters felt that he'd wrecked his own career. He was rehabilitated somewhat in a later speech where he talked about, he felt that he had to be independent as a friend of the king, and that he had to explore every avenue. He always denied that he was the party to a king's party, that is to say, a group of people who would support the king and take over the government, and that was the suspicion at the time. But Churchill was severely hurt by that, and invested an awful lot of political capital in supporting Edward VIII, who promptly married 6 months after the abdication at a French chateau, and then promptly went off to Germany to look at the labor conditions in Germany, escorted by people who eventually turned out to be war criminals.
Mhm. Hey, Unfiltered fam, some breaking news right off the top. Beam's cyber sale is now live for our listeners, and it's their best offer of the year, but only for 48 hours. Right now, friends of the show get up to 50% off, and with my code Kinsey, you can grab Dream for just $32.50. That breaks down to only $1.08 per night for the best sleep of your life. Go to shopbeam.com/Kinsey, use my code Kinsey, and don't miss out. This is the lowest price Dream has ever been sold anywhere and will likely sell out quickly. Dream is packed with ingredients your body actually needs to sleep. reishi, magnesium, L-theanine, and yes, even melatonin, but dosed intelligently, not like the drugstore garbage that knocks you out and leaves you groggy. So now's the time. Beam is giving our community the ultimate royal discount. Go to shopbeam.com/Kinsey, use code Kinsey, and get up to 50% off during Beam's cyber sale. You can grab Dream for just $32.50, but here's the catch. Dream is only available at this price until it sells out. And can I just tell you, their cinnamon cocoa flavor is like Christmas in a cup. You're welcome. So seriously, think about it. How much would you pay for a truly great night's sleep? With Beam's cyber price, it's just $1.08 per night. Enjoy the show. Do you think Harry and Meghan might have fared better if they had taken a similar slow and steady approach when you think back to the Churchill method of just kick it down the hill?
Yeah.
Time heals all wounds.
No question that the Queen had left it very open for Meghan and Harry to go and live in, I don't know, New Zealand, South Africa, one of the Commonwealth countries. They both had Commonwealth um, uh, uh, portfolios.
Mhm.
And it seemed to me that it had been quite cleverly done to leave Britain, England, Ireland, Scotland, and Wales to William and Catherine, the domestic side of things, and for uh, Harry and Meghan to go and live elsewhere.
Mhm.
Just rather like she went to live in Malta for a time after her marriage in 1947. And it
And
was,
didn't she say that that was like one of the happiest times of her life?
yeah, it was a great time. And, you know, Harry has been on record long before Meghan of saying that he'd like to live in South Africa. He would have been a jolly little adventure for him. And because Meghan, even before she met Harry, was a great traveler. I mean, I think I worked out that she'd visited, I don't know, something like 13, 14 countries in a year
Wow.
with her first husband.
Mm. Oh, thanks, Trevor Ingleson. You write about Churchill's loyalty. Do we still see that in our politicians today?
Well,
It's okay. The answer is no. The answer is no, Andrew Morton. He
I think
just,
you don't have that sense of civility and gentlemanly conduct. And I think it's that there's an awful lot of spite and the twisting of facts. Um, in the 30s and 40s, Britain was far more clubbable. That is to say, you know, people went to the same schools, uh, had the same kind of values. Today is more fractured and fragmented, but it's still, we've had a few. I don't know how many old Etonian prime ministers over the last
yeah.
few years. David Cameron and so on, and Boris Johnson.
Old Boris. Oh, God love him. All right, so Prince Philip versus Churchill, we kind of talked about that with the three of them in the marriage, but there was a real clash because Prince Philip felt like the monarchy should be more accessible and modern, and Churchill fought for the monarchy's distant, untouchable brand. I feel like we still see that battle playing out sometimes. I'm team untouchable to this day. I think that the mystique is what makes the palace so exciting and relevant. And even if you look at what's going on with Harry and Meghan's new Kardashian world, I think that that cheapens their brand. Can you tell me a little bit about that in the book? And do you see that still playing out today, where maybe Prince William wants to be more accessible on social media or, you know,
Yeah. Well, I mean, the conflict came between. Well, there was many conflicts between Prince Philip and Churchill, but probably the most notorious was over the televising of the coronation. Churchill, Archbishop of Canterbury, and the Queen herself were against it, against televising the coronation. Philip, who was the chairman of the coronation committee, was very much in favour of it. He thought it was good it was good to democratize the monarchy, to make it more accessible. Um, the Queen herself didn't want to be embarrassed in the way that her father was, where the Archbishop of Canterbury put the crown on the wrong way round, and people fainted, and there were all kinds of uh, uh, things went wrong, and she didn't want to, for millions of people to see a mistake. So that was kind of understandable. Um, when the government said initially that the coronation would not be televised, that is to say, Churchill got his way, there was an uproar, and finally Philip gets his way because the television companies, the members of Parliament, and so on, banded together, and the government realised it had better back down. And the interesting thing is it was the greybeards like Churchill and the Archbishop of Canterbury who were blamed, not the Queen. So fast forward to William. The interesting thing about William, compared to say the Queen, is that the Queen always saw her role as a calling. That is to say, there was a significant religious element into it. And King Charles has always been very religious, and was talking about he wants to be the head of all faith as opposed to just the Church of England. William is rather more pragmatic, it seems to me, and he talks about the role he used to play as a job. I've never heard him talk about it as a calling. So it's not the mystery so much; it's more the mechanism that
Oh.
he's in favour of.
Ah,
So
that's
you're a Churchillian in the sense that you'd like to keep the mystery and the magic, and I would agree with you because let's face it, when there's a national celebration or national mourning, people gather outside Buckingham Palace. They don't gather outside number 10 Downing Street.
Mhm.
And essentially, the monarchy is the silver thread, as Churchill would put it, that unites us with our past and takes us into our present and future.
That's so beautiful. I should end it there, but I have too many more questions for you, so I apologize. I should have been like, that, what a climax, but I can't because I have too many more questions for you. Okay, so when Buckingham Palace was hit during the Blitz, there's this gorgeous photo that captures Churchill walking through the wreckage alongside the King and the Queen. And you talk about how he's this master of optics, and he made sure that the press was there to document this moment, knowing full well his real target audience was President Roosevelt. Churchill really valued the United States, but why he needed Roosevelt to man up.
Yes, he did. And you're quite right. He was aiming for an audience of one because he wanted the Americans to join the war. He realized, as did his, top brass, that England fighting alone with members of the Commonwealth weren't going to defeat Germany,
Mm.
and America had to come into the war. But it was a vain hope because America was very much anti joining the war. It was very isolationist, rather like it is at the moment. And Roosevelt had even though he was sympathetic, had an uphill task. But so these kind of photo ops showing the bombing at Buckingham Palace, showing the Queen and the King examining the what was going on, talking to people from the East End of London, the poor part of London who'd lost their homes. It was to show that Britain's spirit was intact, even though the buildings weren't,
Mm.
and that uh, give us the weapons and we'll finish the job. So there was this kind of the propaganda was not that we're losing. Yes, we're being hit, but we're not downhearted because Churchill realized he had this kind of tightrope to walk. If he said we're going to get beaten if you don't come and help us, who wants to send boatloads of weapons if they know
I
they're
think
going to
they're
end
gonna
up
lose.
if they're going to lose. So that was the tricky, but also we couldn't seem to be too confident because then they would say, well, why do you need our help anyway? You've got an empire. And that was, you know, people say that Britain was hanging on by its eyebrows. Well, it was, but also that we did have Australia, New Zealand, Canada, South Africa, and other Commonwealth countries to have shipping and weapons from.
We don't have to go into the details here, but just so the audience knows, this is what we call a deep tease in the industry. You do document how that war strengthens the relationship between the king and Churchill and how their different personalities benefited each other and supported each other throughout, such an unreal and difficult time. And I enjoyed learning about how that they strengthened each other. They gave each other comfort and a backbone.
Yeah, absolutely. It was essentially a shotgun marriage because George VI wanted Lord Halifax to be Prime Minister, and Lord Halifax was a typical aquiline blue blood who waited for the glittering prizes to drop into his lap. Whereas, of course, as I mentioned earlier, Churchill was, a man who was happy to use his elbows to push and shove and get forward. He had the fire in his belly
Yeah.
to take on the Germans. Um, uh, 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 the other guy didn't. And even though George VI could have pushed uh, harder against Churchill, he recognized that he had that energy and fighting spirit. And they quickly built up a good relationship, one that was quite intimate. It was something of a bromance, really. They really got on very well. And for Churchill, remember, Churchill had this tremendous burden he was carrying, the fate of his nation on
Mhm.
his shoulders. And who could he talk to who wouldn't blab? Well, politicians are all very well, but they tend to blab. And he had George VI, who was silent, who was a listener, and who was a consoler. And he was able to tell him about the decoding operation at Bletchley, about the development of nuclear weapons.
It just seems like you talk about Churchill with the fire in his belly, and King George seems like such a peaceful presence. And so their differences, I think, benefited them in a chaotic time where maybe King George could bring him down a notch if he was stressed or upset. Maybe that peaceful presence, you know, he, I'm sure Churchill appreciated that.
Well, Churchill appreciated George VI, but sometimes they did fall into conflict. I mean, it wasn't always lovey-dovey between them.
Yeah.
Um, when Churchill announced that he was going to join HMS Belfast on D-Day and be in the English Channel watching the action, George VI initially was was sympathetic and said, "Oh, well, I'll come too with you." But then, as soon as George VI's private secretary, Tommy Lascelles, if you may remember him from The Crown, my
Yes.
favourite character without a doubt,
My
he
favorite
said,
character from The Crown is Andrew Morton.
"Well, that's very kind of you."
But
Well,
yes.
and he's told by Tommy Lascelles, not Andrew Morton, told by Tommy Lascelles that do you want to see have your daughter appointing a new prime minister because you're dead and the prime minister's dead. You're in the bottom of the English Channel.
Mhm.
And the top brass, Eisenhower and the other military leaders, thought it was a stupid idea. So um, so the king wrote Churchill a letter. Churchill said he had to share with his troops some of the privations, and he refused to give up his plan to join HMS Belfast. Anyway, various arguments were deployed, and eventually, just before the king was going to drive down to Portsmouth, the harbour where HMS Belfast was based, to actually physically pull Churchill off the ship. Um, Churchill rather reluctantly gave way, and he argued that it was the king had overstepped his mark as a constitutional monarch. He was telling the prime minister, and he was not just prime minister; he was minister of defence,
Mm.
that he'd exceeded his position, but he bowed down to the fact that he was his king, and he had accepted his position.
And
So
his friend, I think, and his
Churchill
friend.
and the king did go in the end. They went a few days afterwards,
Oh.
and as the king himself said, there was a picnic made by Montgomery, and it was the first time they'd tasted brie, or was it camembert, in 5 years.
Aw, so Churchill kind of got his way. You wrote Andrew, the Playboy Prince in 1983. Did the last 2 weeks rock you, having studied a younger Prince Andrew? Were you surprised by him having his titles removed in the way that they were removed? I guess that's my first question.
Well, let me answer that. Yeah, when I in those more innocent times,
Mhm.
Andrew the Playboy Prince was known as Randy Andy.
Mhm.
He was always a ladies' man, but the ladies were, of a mature age.
Yeah.
Um,
And
and
they were like society girls.
they were models. They were society, yeah, as you say, society girls. But and over most of them over 20. So
Most of them, yeah.
I would say all of them actually.
Okay,
But
good.
and so I was initially shocked by the news that he had a sexual relationship with a woman who was 17. Um, but also, given the fact that the palace, as I've mentioned earlier, their tactic is to kick a problem down the road. They finally, in the wake of public anger uh, and the effect it's having on the monarchy, it's staining the name of the monarchy, of the institution. They had to do something, and it taken them a long time, but finally they got it right.
You told a story at an event in Pasadena a few years ago that I was at. I have a beautiful photo of us. Where you said you were at a party and there was a mutual friend there that was friends with Prince Andrew and knew you. Maybe you were just meeting this person for the first time. I don't remember all the details, but you say, yeah, I wrote a book about him. And this guy goes, let's call him. And so he calls Andrew Mountbatten Windsor and says, "Hey, I'm standing here with Andrew Morton." And he immediately hangs up on the person that calls him. And the reason you were telling the story was to discredit this BBC version of events. I have to get on a plane and break up with somebody before I never talked to them again. And you basically said this person that called him and he hung up on, he never talked to him again because he was associating with you. So, no, he's capable of just ghosting people when he wants to ghost people. Am I remembering that story correctly?
Yeah, roughly. I mean, it was a country house party, and I was talking to a chap called Sir David Tang, who was a great friend of Fergie's and a great friend of Andrew's. And as you say, I just mentioned the fact that I'd written a book about Prince Andrew, and he said, "Oh, really? Let's ring Andrew now." And he gets his mobile phone out, presses a preset number, and gets Andrew on the line. And he says, "Tang here. I'm just I'm just speaking to Andrew Morton about the fact that he's written the only book about you." And Andrew says, "You're with Andrew Morton." Click. And that was the end of that conversation. And I tell that story because when he talks on Newsnight about the fact that he went back to the Epstein house to spend 4 or 5 days saying goodbye to him, I thought that was the biggest load of nonsense. And also, members of the royal family, when they don't want to speak to you, they just change your phone number, and that's it. And they don't. There's no big hearts and flowers sentiment. you're out, and when you're out, you're out. And that to me, that assertion by Andrew was the biggest load of horse manure I've heard for a long time.
And you've been saying that for years, so I'm glad I got you on the record here saying that too. All right, so how would Churchill have navigated Andrew Mountbatten Windsor? Do you have any predictions on how he would he have kicked that one on down, or do you think he would have nipped that in the bud sooner than later? Because we've kind of
Oh,
been
I think
seeing this
he would
bubble.
have had to, he would have nipped that one in the bud because it was affecting the monarchy. Bear in mind, it's not the individual he's saving; it's the monarchy,
It's the
and
institution.
it's the institution, and he would have seen the possible damage to the institution by the continuation of this, and he may well have used his influence abroad with America, with American politicians, maybe the president, to sort this whole thing out because it is interesting, isn't it, that it's the Brits only who've suffered. There are no Americans who've been sent to trial or gone to jail.
Yeah, or been asked to testify in front of Congress.
Yeah.
How would Churchill have dealt with Harry and Meghan? Because we've talked about how he's a sucker for a love story. So would he have sympathized with Harry?
Yeah, he probably would have done actually, but he would have asked him to give him more to give the whole thing more time because it was all very abrupt, and there was a genuine case to say if you don't like it, let's just stand back a bit and take it easy, build a family. I mean, he's what was he third in line to the throne, fourth in line to the throne. He was going down the royal totem pole, so he was less and less relevant anyway. Um, and Churchill would have been bewildered by the fact that somebody uh, of royal birth wanted to give up serving the nation,
To
as
keep up with the
especially
Kardashians.
especially especially as a bona fide war hero.
Yeah, just to keep up with the Kardashians. Valentine Lowe told me that Boris Johnson did have a meeting with Prince Harry when Prince Harry started talking about wanting to leave, but we don't know what was said. And I would love to be a fly on the wall to hear what
Well, I
Boris.
think Boris Johnson said the story himself
Oh,
that
did he?
he spoke to Harry and the result was a negative,
Mm.
and it was a bit of a waste of time. Um, but I go back to the fact that the Queen, when she was Princess Elizabeth, she went to Malta for a couple of years and just enjoyed a normal life. And I've always felt that uh, Meghan and Harry never really gave it the kind of time it deserved before they jumped ship. That said, they always had planned an interview with Oprah Winfrey, and they had planned it well before the wedding.
And you know what? Every time I say that, I said, Andrew Morton told me. I never not credit you. I say it all the time. I'm like, they were planning that interview 6 months before the wedding. Andrew Morton told me.
Yeah, they had a meeting in I think a hotel room in probably the Kensington pub, Kensington or somewhere like that.
Yeah. Ah, well, they're giving us plenty to watch. They're giving us plenty of content
Well,
to discuss.
Megan was in Pasadena the other day. She's doing
Filming a movie. Did she knock
she's
on your
filming a
door and
movie.
ask you for your autograph?
No, I was too busy.
Yeah. Well, you wrote one of the nicest books about her ever, so she does owe you a hug, a barefoot hug.
Yeah, a barefoot hug, yeah, or something like that.
Well, Winston and the Windsors, what an enchanting escape. I love it's actually I get emails, I get notifications from Amazon whenever you have a new book coming out. So I was thrilled to see that. And if you haven't purchased it, go purchase it. It's available on Audible. It's available to hold in your hand if you prefer it that way too. Andrew, it's such a pleasure to catch up with you. I know you're usually busy writing books, so thank you for your time today.
My pleasure. Always a pleasure to see you too. And
I
enjoy
know I
your
need to
time.
see you in real life again. We were
We'll
12
meet
hours ago, we were in the same city.
it's either Pasadena or Hampstead.
Oh, I love both of those options. All right, well, we'll make it happen soon. But I am so proud of you and thank you for spending time with me today because you pick some fascinating topics and you always pick people that are worth the time investing in and learning about. It's a
Well,
skill.
I'm glad you appreciate the book. It is. I was thrilled to learn in the USA Today top bestsellers. So
Well, that's just a typical Tuesday for Andrew Morton, if we're being
I wish.
All right, well, I'll talk to you again so soon, and thank you for catching up with me.
And enjoy your time in London.
Thank you.